Did politics ruin D&D? I've noticed that this subject was trending. D&D has been filled with more leftist politics for at least the past 5 years. 5e is flooded with more of a, I don't want to say a liberal like agenda. I don't like the term agenda because I think that implies that there's a negative connotation there, as if it's about hating on conservatives more than it is on making D&D more their own, which I think that's what it is. There are probably more liberals within Wizards of the Coast, so they want to shape D&D to fit their view of what the game should be, even if that wasn't what it was originally. But the question is, would you play D&D with a Trump supporter? Or a question that's just as good is, would you play D&D with a British person, an Asian person, an African person, a Muslim, a Christian? Any of these groups of people probably have very different political views. If you watch anime, you're watching a show written by people who don't think the way that you do. If you read manga, you're reading a manga written by people who probably wouldn't agree with any of your politics, but you're still enjoying their content. I know Harry Potter had a big controversy a few years back when J.K. Rowling turned out to be, I think they call him like a radical feminist. I don't really know the point. Like, to me, it's just like feminism. Like, she wants to like protect women and like doesn't believe that men can be women, which is a common opinion. Even though most people who have that opinion are just afraid to say it, they'll say it to other people who agree with them or who they think will agree, but publicly they won't come out and say that. J.K. Rowling then will admit it. That's just the truth. And it's the same thing with Trump supporters. Most Trump supporters I know, around other people who think like them, they're very likely to talk about their beliefs in Donald Trump. But around more liberal friends, they're afraid to bring that up or even admit to it if asked, because they know how their liberal friends will react. Usually they'll start an argument. They want to change people's minds, even though the reason I don't think it's a good idea to discuss politics with friends, acquaintances, and especially people on the internet is because you don't know how those people came to those conclusions, especially on the internet. I don't know you, random person in my comment section. I respect you, I respect your opinion, and I understand that you probably come to your opinion based on your experiences and your beliefs. I genuinely believe that you believe whatever your political opinion is, even if it's different from mine. I believe that you have a reason to believe that. I have a reason to believe my political opinions that other people might not understand, but I do hope that they respect. I'm not going to reveal most of my political affiliations. I don't really line up with either party. I guess that's kind of a reveal of it. I'm almost like a libertarian, people have told me, but I don't know if that's more so because like I believe sometimes Republicans are right and sometimes Democrats are right, and I'm willing to call both out equally. There are a lot of things that Donald Trump does that I really like. There's a lot of things that Bernie Sanders does that I really like. And like, I think it's really stupid that Democrats will screw over those like Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard in favor of people like Biden, who like really isn't very good at his job. We could have Bernie the past 4 years, and then we probably wouldn't have Trump this time. Or Tulsi Gabbard would have also been a better Democratic candidate, but they kind of screwed her over until she ended up turning Republican. Although I don't think her beliefs have changed. She's just changed her affiliation so that she can work closer with people who she believes are more likely to work together to get things done, rather than push their own ideas and not mediate. Anyway, I digress. I know politics is a very sensitive subject, especially in D&D, because you have all these safety tools where people get, for lack of a better word, triggered easily. Triggers are a real thing, a very real thing. People are afraid of spiders. They have phobias of certain things like that are very real and have always been recognized. There's some new things that I don't believe are real, like some of the safety tools I've seen are like violence and fire, which doesn't make any sense to me because you can't go anywhere in D&D without a fire. Like, you need a torch or a candle. There's no electricity. So like, how is there light in this world? Do you only go out in the sun? And I've even seen more irrational safety tools needed. I think realistically, all I have to do whenever I sit down at a table as a DM is tell people like, listen, just don't be creepy. And if you're creepy, I'm kicking you out of my table. I don't need to use safety tools at my table, because if someone is a creep, if they're really weird, I would kind of rather them just reveal that so I can tell them this isn't the table for you. You can go find your own place, rather than just having like a closet weirdo at my table. Now, I'm not saying if you're like a furry or you have like some kind of weird thing about you, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with you, I guess. I'm not saying that I wouldn't play D&D with you. I'm just saying don't bring up your sexual fetishes at the table. That's one of the reasons why I don't like the horny bard stereotype. I think a lot of it does come from an actual fetish that's disguised as comedy, because it's really not funny, and I don't think it's ever been funny. I don't know anyone who's actually laughed at that except for the person making the jokes. So if someone says something about how they want to, you know, with the dragon or the blank or with any of the NPCs that I'm playing as the DM, I find that a little strange. There's definitely something there that shouldn't be, and that's not saying that like I'm triggered or I'm offended, just weirded out, you know? So there are some people that I wouldn't necessarily want to play D&D with. But when it comes to their political affiliation, if they've voted for Biden or Trump or Gore or Bush, I'm not necessarily going to hold it against them for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that not everyone has time to research everything that goes on in politics. Some people just have certain beliefs that they hold on to, and they're going to vote based on those beliefs specifically. They don't see that blank was caught up in this controversy or blank was caught doing this when they said don't do that. So the rules for the not for me crowd, which a lot of Republicans and Democrats both partake in. So I'm not calling out one side in particular, but I do believe that treating politics as worship, as your god, is very unhealthy. If you can't play a game of D&D with someone who likes different politicians than you, or rather votes differently than you, I do think that's very unhealthy, and you should see some kind of therapist, because it doesn't make sense to me. And the reason for that is the people I know that don't agree politically, that can't get along, are usually people who hate their family members. And hating your family members based on their political affiliations is a very big red flag, a very big red flag. And if that's you, you might need some help. And the reason for that is because if you would disown or disrespect your family because they voted different for you, especially if it's like your mother or your father who provided for you and made sure you had your cell phones, your TVs, your Game Boys, your Nintendos, all of your games, but they didn't let you paint your room one time, so you're really upset about that, then it's a very big problem. It comes off as incredibly narcissistic, and to me, it means that you have no skill in mediating. If you see someone with a different viewpoint as you, it upsets you, and I think that's very, very unhealthy. I'm not going to go to China and be upset because they think differently. They're in a completely different part of the world. Of course they're going to think differently. There's even some places in Japan that I'm pretty sure don't let Americans in their business because of certain things that Americans have done, and they have a certain prejudice towards us because they don't want their stuff ruined. And I completely understand that. If they see me and they think like there's a really high chance of something bad happening, I'm going to respect their wishes to keep my distance so that, you know, they can be comfortable. I think that's totally fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Even though I would be part of the group that's discriminated against, I think it's okay to have boundaries. So whenever I say you can tell someone no when they want to play at your D&D table based on their politics, I do think that's fine. If you just want everyone to be comfortable, you don't want to have to worry about talking about politics or anything, your arguments. But my problem is more so in the fact that if you can't get along politically while you're playing a game with friends, but my problem more so deals with the fact that when you're playing a game of D&D, especially if you play online with people that you don't know very well, you have no idea what their political affiliations are. You have no idea if they're criminals. You have no idea if they're actually heroes. You don't know anything about them. They could very well be voting against your human rights or your like rights to own guns. Like, you don't know personally if they're random people on the internet. So you've likely played D&D with someone on the other side of the political aisle anyway, and if you haven't noticed, then obviously it wasn't that big of a deal. Especially since, like I said, a lot of Trump supporters aren't going to come out and say that they're a Trump supporter. They're just going to play the game. In my experience, most Trump supporters can easily integrate themselves into groups of people they disagree with, more so than liberals can. I have liberal friends and conservative friends. The conservatives don't mind the liberals, but the liberals, they're pretty aggressive. Not like physically aggressive, because they're usually, not always, but they're usually the ones who are kind of like the smaller guys. Usually the bigger guys at the gym are more conservative based, but there's some big liberals too. So I'm not like hating on anybody in particular. Well, I'm not hating on anybody at all. That's what I'm trying to preach. I don't think anybody should be hated on because of their beliefs, because the belief isn't necessarily, to me, their belief isn't necessarily who they are. You can't choose to believe something. Either you believe it or you don't. So obviously experiences in their lives have contributed to their beliefs. The biggest reason why I don't believe you should discriminate based on politics in D&D, the biggest reason I don't, you can do whatever you want at your table. That's perfectly fine. I'm not going to judge how you play at your home. But one of my experiences from a far leftist, I don't know, I wouldn't really consider this a liberal, but he's a far leftist and a literal neo-Nazi. Not like, he's not a Republican, he's not just conservative, he's genuinely a neo-Nazi who hates certain groups of people openly. And I'm not going to say exactly what his beliefs are, but they're so rancid that yes, Republicans like usually hate him too, because he's absolutely insane. Both of these two are insane, but they're considered on different sides of the aisle. But there was a point where during talks with politics, because I was saying good and bad things about both sides, weighing options fairly, I ended up making both of them incredibly angry at me. Insanely angry, to the point where these two were dogpiling me. A neo-Nazi and a far leftist came together because of their shared hatred. That's why I don't like when people go overboard with their worship of politics, of their political side, because they're cults. And it's not based on beliefs a lot of the times. The people who freak out, who try to terrorize others, they bond over hatred. They don't necessarily care about their political side. They just know that their side has so much hate for the other side, and they want someone to bond over that. They want someone to hate with them. They don't want to hate alone. They don't want to sit there and wallow in self-pity by themselves. They want to join a group of hateful people. And that's why you have all these crazies on the right and the left. If they had a shared enemy, they would get along just fine, because they don't care about anything. They do care about one thing, and that's hate. And hate doesn't actually hurt other people most of the time. Hate hurts the person who's doing the hate. It makes them miserable. It makes their lives miserable. It makes it difficult for them to enjoy things. And most of the time, people like that don't really accomplish anything in their lives, which actually has a bit of a sadness to it, which sucks for normal people that do feel empathy, because then you could even feel bad for the real life villains. But anyway, I just wanted other people's opinions. What do you think? Do you think politics ruins D&D? Could you play with a Trump supporter? Could you play with a Biden supporter? Could you play with anyone on any political side of the aisle? Could you play in a game with safety tools if you're against safety tools? Could you play in a game without safety tools if you're pro safety tools? Basically, would you play in a game with people who have different opinions? Because I would. After all, I'm making a webcomic, I'm gonna shill. And all of the characters in this story have very different opinions. And a lot of those opinions are political, not necessarily American politics, but within the setting and that realm's politics, there are heroes who just have different beliefs of how the world should be run. And I think that's what makes the group interesting, because realistically, a lot of people are just trying to make the world a better place and the best they can. It's not necessarily about hate. Some people hate, but I like to believe that most people don't. And based on my experience, the ones that hate are the most miserable. And I don't want anyone to be miserable, so I like to preach acceptance, love, actual tolerance. So if you've never thought about playing D&D with somebody who was politically different, then maybe give it a shot. Maybe you'll find out that you actually can have fun together. And then in having fun together, you'll realize that the person on the other side of the aisle is still human. They have family and friends just like you that they want to protect, even if they disagree.